Welcome back to Mr. Midnight. Tonight, I've got 8 true horror stories from Oregon that honestly gave me chills while reading them. And here's the thing, these didn't happen to ghost hunters or paranormal investigators. These happened to regular people. A guy making tacos, a woman fixing broken sinks, someone serving coffee. Just normal folks doing normal jobs until something went terribly, terribly wrong. What would you do if customers at your job started acting strange? Not rude, strange, but wrong, like something's controlling them. Or what if you notice something changing about yourself, but you're the only one who can't see it? One of tonight's stories involves a person who moved to a new city to escape, only to find out that distance doesn't matter. Another story? Let's just say some things in the deep woods have been watching us a lot longer than we've been watching them. These 8 people thought they knew their jobs. They were wrong. If you're new to Mr. Midnight, hit that subscribe button because we cover the true stories that most people are too scared to talk about. Alright, let's get into it. But fair warning, you might want to leave a light on tonight. My name is Marcus Rivera, and I've been working food trucks for 3 years now, ever since I graduated high school. Started with my uncle Tony when I was 20, learning the business from the ground up. Tony's been running his taco truck in downtown Portland for over 15 years, built up a solid reputation serving office workers and college students. Good food, fair prices, reliable service, FUL, that's how you survive in the food truck game. I thought I knew everything about dealing with difficult customers, health inspectors, and the daily grind of prep work and long hours. But what happened 3 weeks ago at our regular spot on 5th and Morrison changed everything I thought I knew about this job. Some customers aren't just looking for food. We've been parking on the same corner every weekday for the past 2 years, 5th and Morrison, right in the heart of downtown Portland. Perfect location for lunch rush, surrounded by office buildings and just a few blocks from Portland State University. We'd roll up at 8:30 every morning, spend an hour prepping ingredients and firing up the grill, then serve steady customers from 11 to 3. Tony taught me his system. Prep everything the night before when possible. Keep the line moving fast during rush hour, and always remember the regulars because they're your bread and butter. Our truck is a converted Chevy step van, painted bright red with Tony's Tacos in yellow letters on both sides. We've got a flat-top grill, a small fryer, 2 prep stations, and just enough room for both of us to work without bumping into each other. The serving window faces the street, and there's a small counter where customers can add salsa and lime from squeeze bottles. Not fancy, but it works. We serve carnitas, carne asada, chicken, and veggie tacos, plus chips, drinks, and Tony's famous green salsa that people drive across town for. The money's decent. On a good day, we'll clear $400, and I get 20% plus tips. Enough to pay for my community college classes and cover rent on the basement apartment I share with 2 roommates on Hawthorne Street. The work's hard but honest. You've got to be fast, friendly, and consistent. Most customers are regulars who work in the nearby buildings, and you learn their orders by heart. 2 chicken tacos with extra cilantro for the nurse from the medical building. Veggie burrito, no cheese, for the environmental lawyer who bikes to work. 3 carnitas tacos, extra hot sauce, for the middle-aged guy in the business suit. That last customer started coming around about 6 months ago. Every Tuesday and Thursday, like clockwork, he'd show up at exactly 12:15 and order the same thing. 2 carnitas tacos with extra hot sauce. Never varied his order, never made small talk, just paid with exact change and walked away to eat at one of the small tables the city lets us set up on the sidewalk. Seemed harmless enough, lots of office. Workers have routines like that. But 3 weeks ago, something changed. Instead of taking his food and leaving, he started hanging around after finishing his tacos. At first, I figured he was just taking a longer lunch break, maybe checking his phone or enjoying the fresh air. Portland office workers do that sometimes, especially when the weather's nice. But then I noticed he wasn't looking at his phone. He was watching me work through the serving window. Not watching the food preparation, which customers do all the time. They like seeing their tacos made fresh. He was watching me. My hands as I chopped onions, my face when I talked to other customers, the way I moved around the small space inside the truck. It made my skin crawl, but I tried to ignore it. You get weird customers in food service. and Tony always said to stay professional unless someone crosses a line. After a week of this behavior, I mentioned it to Tony. "That guy in the suit's been acting strange," I told him during our Tuesday morning prep. "Just stands there staring after he eats." Tony shrugged. "Some people are lonely, Marcus. Office job, eating lunch alone every day. Maybe he likes watching someone who actually enjoys their work." Made sense at the time. Portland's full of transplants who don't know anyone, spending their days in cubicles. If watching me flip tortillas made his lunch break more interesting, I could deal with it. But it got worse. The man started showing up earlier each day. First it was 12 o'clock, then 11:45, then 11:30. By the second week, he was standing across the street at 9 in the morning, watching me unload supplies from Tony's truck and carry them into our food truck. He'd stay there for 2 hours, just watching, until we opened for lunch. When customers came to order, he'd move closer to our window, studying how I interacted with each person, how I smiled and took their orders, how I called the regulars by name, how I handled money and made change. It felt like being analyzed, like he was taking notes on my behavior for some reason I couldn't figure out. I started feeling like prey being stalked by a predator. You know that feeling when you're walking alone at night and hear footsteps behind you, matching your pace? That's how I felt every day at work, knowing he was out there watching. My hands would shake when I was making food, and I'd catch myself glancing toward the window to see if he was still there. He always was. Thursday morning of the second week, I arrived at 8:30 to find a note taped to the side of our truck, right next to the serving window. White notebook paper folded in half with my name written on the outside in black ink. Inside, in the same shaky handwriting, "You have beautiful hands, Marcus." My stomach dropped. This wasn't just some lonely office worker anymore. Someone had been watching me closely enough to learn my name. It's not like we wear name tags. With someone problem, and they'd come to our truck after hours to leave me a personal message. The handwriting looked like it had been written by someone excited or nervous, letters uneven and words slanting downward. I showed the note to Tony as soon as he arrived. His face went serious for the first time since I'd been working for him. "We should call the police," he said, turning the paper over in his hands. "And tell them what? Someone left me a weird note?" We don't even know for sure it was the suit guy. But we both knew it was him. Who else had been paying that much attention to me? Tony wanted to file a report anyway, but I talked him out of it. What were the cops going to do? No threats had been made, no laws broken, just a creepy compliment that made me want to scrub my hands until they were raw. Friday, the man didn't show up at all. For the first time in 2 weeks, I worked a full day without feeling eyes on me. Maybe the note had been his weird way of asking me out, and when I didn't respond, he'd moved on. Maybe he'd found someone else to fixate on. I let myself hope it was over. But at closing time, as I was wiping down the prep counter, I found another note. This one was tucked under the cash box, which meant someone had reached through the serving window while I was distracted. "I know where you live on Hawthorne Street." He was right. My apartment was on Hawthorne, about 20 blocks southeast of downtown. I'd never told him that. Hell, I'd never even spoken to him beyond taking his order, which meant he'd followed me home at some point, learned my address, probably knew my schedule outside of work too. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept getting up to check the locks on our front door and the deadbolt on my bedroom door. My apartment is in the basement of an old house, with windows at ground level that look out onto the street. Every time a car drove by, headlights would sweep across my ceiling, and I'd wonder if it was him checking to see if I was home. Saturday morning, the man was back at his usual spot across from our truck, but this time he wasn't alone. 3 other guys in business suits stood with him, all middle-aged, all watching me with the same intense stare that had been making my skin crawl for weeks. They stood in a line like they were waiting for something, occasionally talking to each other but never taking their eyes off our truck. "Tony," I said, nodding toward the street. "Look." Tony followed my gaze and his face went pale. 4 of them now. "What do you think they want?" "Nothing good." We went through our morning prep routine, but everything felt different, with 4 men watching our every move. When I carried ingredients from Tony's truck to our food truck, they'd shift position to keep me in sight. When I fired up the grill, they'd lean forward slightly, like they were listening to the sound. It felt coordinated, like they'd planned this. Around noon, During our lunch rush, one of the new guys approached our window. Mid-40s, gray suit, receding hairline. He ordered 4 carnitas tacos, extra hot sauce, and paid with a $20 bill. When I handed him the bag of food, he grabbed my wrist and held it firmly. "Such smooth skin," he whispered, running his thumb across the back of my hand. Just like he said. I jerked my hand back, and he smiled before walking back to the other 3 men. They gathered around him as he distributed the tacos, and I could see them looking at me while they ate, taking photos with their phones, pointing at different parts of the truck, like they were discussing something specific. "We need to move," I told Tony. "This is our best spot, Marcus. We've been here 2 years." "I don't care. Something's wrong with those guys." But Tony was stubborn. He'd built his business on consistency, showing up at the same place every day so customers knew where to find him. Moving the truck would mean losing half our ever hold, regular customers, maybe more. He promised we'd call the police if they did anything illegal, but watching us wasn't a crime. The 4 men stayed until closing time, never more than 50 feet from our truck. Every time I looked up from the grill, at least one of them was staring at me. They took turns going to the bathroom or making phone calls, but someone was always watching, like they were taking shifts. Sunday we were closed, but I drove by our corner around noon anyway. All 4 men were there, standing in the exact same spots they'd occupied the day before, just waiting. On a Sunday, when they should have been home with their families or running errands, instead, they were standing on a street corner in downtown Portland, waiting for a food truck that wouldn't be there for another 18 hours. Monday morning, I knew something was wrong before I even got out of Tony's truck. Our food truck's windows were spider-webbed with cracks, and both front tires were completely flat. Someone had slashed them during the night, leaving long cuts in the rubber that went down to the metal rims. Spray painted on the side of the truck, in red letters 3 feet tall. "We know what you taste like, Marcus." Tony called the police this time, and 2 officers showed up within 20 minutes. They took photos of the damage and filled out a vandalism report, but they seemed skeptical when we tried to explain about the 4 men who'd been watching us. "Probably just random vandalism," one of the cops said. "Happens to food trucks sometimes. People get drunk, think it's funny to mess with someone's livelihood." "What about the message? It mentions me by name." "Could be someone who knows you. Ex-girlfriend maybe? Someone from school?" I tried to explain that I'd never seen these men before 3 weeks ago, that they'd been escalating their behavior, following me home. But without evidence, there wasn't much the police could do. They promised to increase the patrols in the area and told us to call immediately if the men showed up again. While we waited for the tow truck and tire repair, the 4 men appeared across the street. Same suits, same positions, watching us deal with the damage they'd probably caused. One of them, the original guy who'd been stalking me, actually waved when he saw me looking, like we were old friends. It took most of Monday to get the truck repaired and the graffiti painted over. We lost a full day of sales, which meant I couldn't make my share of rent that month. But the men waited patiently while we worked, never leaving their positions across the street. When the repairs were finally done and we opened for the last 2 hours of lunch service, they applauded. Tuesday, Tony decided to try a different location. We set up on 3rd and Washington, about 6 blocks from our usual spot. Different customer base, mostly people working in the government buildings nearby. For 2 hours, I felt normal again. No one watching, no one staring, just regular customers ordering food and going about their day. Then, just before 1 o'clock, I saw them walking down 3rd Street. All 4 men in business suits, moving in formation like they were military or police. They'd found us somehow, tracked our truck across downtown Portland. Within minutes, they'd resumed their positions, 2 across the street, 2 on the same side as us, but 20 feet away. Back to watching, waiting, planning whatever they were planning. One of them approached during the afternoon rush and ordered a chicken quesadilla. When I asked if he wanted salsa, he smiled and said, "What time do you get off work, Marcus? What days are you here alone?" "I'm not telling you that." "That's okay, we'll figure it out ourselves." He was right, and we both knew it. They'd been watching long enough to map out my entire routine. When I arrived, when I left, what route I took home, which days Tony worked, and which days I was alone in the truck. They probably knew more about my schedule than I did. By Thursday, they'd organized themselves into shifts. One man was always watching while the others left, probably to eat or use the bathroom or check in with whoever was coordinating this. Because it was definitely coordinated now. 4 grown men don't spend their weekdays stalking a food truck worker unless they're planning something specific. They'd positioned themselves, so I was always in sight of at least one of them. If I moved to the prep station at the back of the truck, the guy across the street would move to see through the serving window. If I went outside to clean tables, the guy on our side of the street would follow at a distance. They'd turned downtown Portland into a surveillance network with me at the center. Friday evening, Tony left early for a dentist appointment. I stayed to clean the truck and prep ingredients for Monday, something I'd done alone dozens of times before. But as I was washing dishes in our small sink, I heard footsteps approaching from behind the truck. All 4 men had surrounded us while I was distracted. The original guy in the business suit was standing at the serving window, and I could see the other 3 positioned around the truck like they were blocking escape routes. "Time to come with us, Marcus," he said through the window. His voice was calm, friendly, like he was inviting me to lunch. I grabbed the biggest knife we had, a 10-inch chef's knife we used for chopping onions, and held it where he could see it. "Stay back. I'm calling the police." They laughed. Actually laughed, like I'd told a joke. "We've been planning this for weeks," the man said. "We know exactly when you're alone, when no one's around to help you. We know which direction you'll run, how fast you can move, where you'll try to hide." I reached for my phone to call 911, but nothing happened when I pressed the power button. Dead battery. I'd forgotten to charge it during the lunch rush, and now it was useless. But even if I could call for help, how long would it take for police to arrive? 5 minutes? 10? These men had been planning this moment for 3 weeks. They weren't going to wait around for cops. The truck started rocking back and forth. At first I thought it was wind, but then I realized they were doing it on purpose. All 4 men had positioned themselves around our truck and were pushing it from different sides, trying to tip it over with me inside. The knife fell from my hands as I grabbed the prep counter to keep from falling. Our food truck weighs about 15,000 pounds when it's loaded with equipment, but if you get enough people pushing from the right angles, you can definitely tip it. I'd seen it happen to other trucks during protests or when drunk college students got rowdy. The rocking was getting worse, and I could hear them coordinating their efforts outside. The only way out was through the roof hatch we used for cleaning the exhaust system. I climbed onto the prep counter, pushed open the hatch, and pulled myself onto the roof of the truck. For a moment, I was 20 feet above the street, looking down at 4 men who'd spent weeks planning to kidnap me from my workplace. Then I ran. I jumped from the truck roof to the sidewalk and took off down Morrison Street toward the river. Behind me, I could hear them shouting and running. They were older than me, probably out of shape from sitting in offices all day. But they knew downtown Portland better than I'd expected. When I turned down side streets trying to lose them, they'd split up and try to cut me off. For 6 blocks, they chased me through downtown Portland. Past the courthouse, through Pioneer Square, down toward the waterfront. I was gaining distance, 23 years old versus 4 men in their 40s, but they were persistent, organized. Every time I thought I'd lost them, one would appear from a cross street or alley. I only escaped by running into McMenamin's, a crowded restaurant on 3rd Avenue. Burst through the front door during dinner rush, probably looking like I'd lost my mind, and begged the manager to call police. He took one look at my face and didn't ask questions. By the time 2 patrol cars arrived, the 4 men had vanished. Police searched the area for 20 minutes but found nothing. No trace of them. No security camera footage clear enough to identify faces. No witnesses who'd seen anything unusual. I gave a full statement and described each man as best I could, but Portland police told me the same thing they'd said about the vandalism. Without evidence of an actual crime, there wasn't much they could do. Following someone isn't illegal. Watching a food truck isn't illegal. Even surrounding someone and rocking their truck probably counted as vandalism, not kidnapping or assault. The men never came back. For 3 days, I watched our usual corner from across the street, expecting to see them waiting in formation, but they were gone, like they'd never existed. Tony and I moved the truck to a different location anyway, 3rd and Yamhill, near the college campus. Younger customer base, better police response time, more witnesses if anything went wrong. I still work food trucks, but everything's different now. I carry pepper spray and keep my phone charged at all times. I pay attention to customers who linger too long or ask personal questions. I vary my schedule and never work alone after dark. Most people don't believe this story when I tell it. 4 businessmen spending weeks planning to kidnap a food truck worker? It sounds crazy, like something from a movie. But I know what happened. I know they were organized, patient, and absolutely serious about whatever they were planning to do to me. Sometimes I wonder if they found someone else. Another young man working alone somewhere in Portland. Someone without a knife or a roof hatch or 6 blocks worth of running stamina. I hope not, but I'll probably never know. What I do know is this: if you work alone, stay alert. Trust your instincts when customers act strange. And remember that some people aren't looking for food when they approach your truck. They're looking for you. My name is Sarah Martinez, and I've been working in property maintenance for 6 years. I started right after high school, learning the trade from my uncle who managed apartment complexes around Portland. I can fix anything: broken pipes, faulty wiring, stuck windows, you name it. It's honest work that pays the bills and lets me take care of my 7-year-old daughter, Emma. But what happened at Pineview Apartments in Bend last month made me question everything I thought I knew about reality itself. I'd been working at Pineview for 8 months when this whole nightmare started. The complex has 120 units spread across 6 buildings, mostly housing young professionals who work downtown and retirees who move to Bend for the mountain views. It's a decent place, built in the 1980 seconds with solid bones, though the plumbing can be temperamental and the heating system needs constant attention during winter months. I knew every tenant by name, every apartment layout by heart, and every quirk of the old copper pipes that ran through the walls. Mrs. Patterson in 2A always called about her garbage disposal, making weird noises. Mr. Rodriguez in 2D had a sliding door that would stick during humid weather. Building maintenance was my world, and I was good at it. The property manager, Dan Morrison, hired me because I could handle emergency calls at any hour and never complained about the messy jobs. Clogged toilets, broken locks, heating failures in the middle of winter, I'd seen it all. My toolbox was always organized, my work van was stocked with every part I might need, and I kept detailed logs of every repair and maintenance request. That's why what happened next made no sense at all. It started on a Tuesday morning in late October. Mrs. Patterson called the office at 7 a.m., her voice tight with disgust. "There's a horrible smell coming from somewhere," she told Dan, who then radioed me. "It smells like rotting meat mixed with bleach. I can't even open my windows because it's so strong." Mrs. Patterson lived in 2A, Building C. Right next door was apartment 2C, which had been vacant for 3 months since the last tenant moved out. I checked my maintenance logs. 2C was clean, carpet shampooed, walls painted, ready for the next renter. No maintenance issues, no pest problems, nothing unusual. But when I knocked on Mrs. Patterson's door, she looked genuinely disturbed. "Sarah, thank God you're here," she said, covering her nose with a dish towel. "That smell is making me sick. It has to be coming from 2C. I stood in her doorway and breathed deeply. Nothing. Just the normal apartment complex smells, mag God, coffee brewing somewhere, laundry detergent from the machines downstairs, maybe a hint of someone's breakfast cooking. "I don't smell anything unusual, Mrs. Patterson," I said gently. "But let me check 2C just to be sure." Her eyes widened. "You can't smell that? It's so strong I threw up twice this morning." I unlocked apartment 2C with my master key. The unit was completely empty and spotless, just like I'd left it after the last cleaning. No smell of any kind, rotting or otherwise. But something felt off. The apartment was warm, almost stuffy, even though the thermostat was set to off and the windows were closed. I checked every room, every closet, even opened the refrigerator. Nothing. No dead mice in the walls, no forgotten food, no broken pipes or gas leaks. The apartment was cleaner than most people's homes. The next morning, Mr. Rodriguez called. "That smell from 2C is getting worse," he complained. "My wife couldn't sleep last night. It's seeping through the walls somehow." Again, I investigated. Again, I smelled nothing. But now I was getting a sick feeling in my stomach that had nothing to do with any mysterious odor. By Friday, the complaints had spread. Mrs. Chen from Building A called to report the same rotting meat smell. Then Mr. and Mrs. Foster from Building D. Within a week, I was getting calls from tenants in all 6 buildings, all describing the identical smell, rotting meat mixed with cleaning chemicals. But here's the thing that made my hands shake every time I thought about it. Building A was 200 yards away from Building C. Building D was even farther. There was no way a smell from one vacant apartment could travel that distance and affect every single building in the complex. I started keeping a detailed map, marking every complaint with pins. The pattern was impossible, complaints spreading outward from 2C like ripples in a pond, but affecting buildings that weren't even connected by the same ventilation system. I hired Bennett Pest Control to check for dead animals in the walls. They found nothing. Called in Morrison Air Quality to test for gas leaks, mold, or chemical contamination. Their equipment registered normal readings across the entire complex. Even brought in Richardson Plumbing to camera scope the sewer lines. Think maybe there was a backup or break I'd missed. Every professional I hired told me the same thing. Nothing wrong here, Sarah. Complex is clean. But the complaints kept coming, every day, multiple times a day. Tenants started getting angry, accusing me of ignoring their health concerns or being incompetent. You're either lying or you're sick yourself, Mrs. Patterson snapped during one particularly heated conversation. That smell is making us all sick, and you just stand there acting like nothing's wrong. Mr. Rodriguez started leaving voicemails, saying I was deliberately hiding something in 2C. What are you storing in there? Dead animals? Chemicals? We deserve to know what you're poisoning us with. 3 families moved out in 1 week, all citing maintenance negligence on their lease termination forms. Dan started getting nervous about occupancy rates and called me into his office. Sarah, I've received 47 complaints about this smell situation, he said, shuffling through a stack of papers. I know you're doing your best, but tenants are threatening to involve the health department. Dan, I've hired every specialist in Central Oregon, I said, my voice cracking with frustration. There's nothing wrong with the building. I've checked 2C 100 times. I believe you, he said, but his expression said otherwise. Just keep trying. Figure something out. That's when things got really weird. On a Wednesday morning, Mrs. Patterson cornered me in the parking lot. The smell isn't coming from the apartment anymore, she said, her eyes hard and suspicious. It's coming from you. I stepped back, confused. What do you mean? You smell like rotting meat, Sarah, like death. How can you not notice that? I went home immediately and showered for 20 minutes, scrubbing with antibacterial soap until my skin was raw. Changed into completely fresh clothes, used deodorant, perfume, everything I could think of. When I picked Emma up from school that afternoon, I asked her if Mommy smelled funny. Emma wrinkled her nose and moved away from me. Yeah, Mommy, you smell really bad, like when we found that dead bird in the yard. My heart stopped. Emma never lied to me about anything. That night, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror for an hour, sniffing my arms, my clothes, my hair. I couldn't smell anything unusual, but Emma refused to hug me goodnight and slept in the living room instead of her bedroom. The next morning, Dan called me into his office again. This time, he stayed behind his desk and spoke through a cloth mask. Sarah, I'm sorry, but I have to let you go, he said, not meeting my eyes. The tenant complaints have become overwhelming. Dan, you can't fire me for something that doesn't exist, I protested. I'm standing 10 feet away from you, and I can barely breathe, he said. I don't know what's happening to you, but I can't ignore this anymore. He handed me my final paycheck from across the room and asked me to turn in my keys and radio. For 2 weeks, I applied for jobs all over Bend. Every interview ended the same way. The hiring manager would suddenly seem uncomfortable, make excuses about needing to review other candidates, and cut the meeting short. Even the unemployment office clerk asked if I needed medical attention. Emma went to stay with my sister in Portland after her teacher called, saying other children were complaining about Emma smelling bad. My own daughter wouldn't come home because of a smell I couldn't detect, but that apparently made everyone around me sick. I was completely alone. No job, no friends willing to be near me, no family contact. I spent days researching online, trying to find medical conditions that could cause phantom odors or make someone smell bad without realizing it. I found nothing that matched my situation. Last week, I drove back to Pineview Apartments, desperate for answers. Maybe if I could talk to Dan again, show him I was getting help, prove somehow that I wasn't the problem. Dan looked genuinely confused when I approached his office. "Sarah, what are you doing here? I thought you moved back to Portland after you stopped showing up for work." "What do you mean, stopped showing up?" I asked. "You fired me because of the smell complaints." Dan pulled up records on his computer, frowning. "According to my files, you missed 12 days of work in October without calling in. I had to terminate you for job abandonment. There's nothing here about any smell complaints." He showed me the screen. Official termination reason: excessive unexcused absences. "What about apartment 2C?" I pressed. "All the tenant complaints about the rotting smell." "2C?" Dan looked more confused. "That unit's been rented since September. Nice young couple, no problems at all." "Sarah, are you feeling okay? You look like you haven't slept in weeks." I drove straight to Emma's school in Portland. Her teacher, Mrs. Williams, looked concerned when I asked about complaints regarding Emma's hygiene. "Complaints? Emma's never had any hygiene issues, Miss Martinez. She's one of our most well-groomed students. Are you sure you're thinking of the right school? I'm writing this from my car in a 24-hour diner parking lot because I can't go home. Emma still won't stay in the same room with me, and my sister says the smell makes her nauseous. But according to everyone's official records, none of this ever happened. I lost my job, my home, my family, and my sanity over complaints that apparently never existed. Except they did exist. I lived through every angry phone call, every disgusted look, every day of isolation. The worst part isn't that I smell like death to everyone around me. The worst part is that I still can't smell it myself. Whatever's happening to me, whatever I've become, I'm trapped inside it with no way to understand or fix it. If you work in maintenance, if you spend your days in empty apartments and vacant spaces, be careful what you carry out with you. Some things stick to you in ways that soap and water can't wash clean, and sometimes the only person who can't smell the rot is the person it's coming from. My name is Maria Santos, and I've been working as a cashier at Riverside Market in Medford for 2 years now. It's not glamorous work, but I know every barcode by heart can spot a fake 20 from across the register. And I've built real relationships with our regular customers. Mrs. Henderson always asks about my college classes. Mr. Thompson brings me coffee on slow Tuesday mornings, and the Martinez family's kids draw me pictures that I keep taped to my register. I thought I understood people, their shopping habits, their moods, their stories. But what happened 3 months ago at our little neighborhood grocery store changed everything I thought I knew about human behavior. Sometimes the most terrifying thing isn't a monster hiding in the dark. It's when normal people stop being normal and you realize you're the only one who notices. Riverside Market sits right in the heart of Old Medford, a small neighborhood store where 3 generations of families have shopped together. We're not a big chain, just 8 aisles, 2 checkout lanes, and a deli counter that makes the best sandwiches in town. I work the main register, and Dave, our manager, handles the customer service desk. The store has this warm, lived-in feeling with creaky wooden floors and handwritten sale signs that Dave's been using for 15 years. Our customers aren't just faces, they're neighbors. I know Mrs. Chen comes in every Thursday for her diabetes medication pickup, that the college kids buy ramen in bulk during finals week, and that old Mr. Rodriguez always pays with exact change counted out slowly from a leather coin purse. 3 months ago, everything started changing when new people began moving into the Hillcrest subdivision, a development of identical townhouses about 6 blocks from our store. I first noticed them on a gray Monday morning in early September. 5 adults walked into the store together. 3 women and 2 men, all pale and thin, wearing dark clothing that looked expensive, but somehow old-fashioned. They moved through the aisles like they were following an invisible map, never speaking to each other, never looking around at the displays or sale signs. They came to my register with identical items: 6 cans of mixed vegetables, 2 loaves of white bread, 1 gallon of whole milk. Nothing else. No fruit, no meat, no snacks, no personal care items. When I tried my usual friendly greeting, "Find everything you needed today?" they just stared at me with pale blue eyes until I finished scanning their groceries. The total was $47.32, paid with crisp new $20 bills. They took their receipt and left without a word. At first, I thought they were just shy or maybe didn't speak English well. But then more groups started coming in, always 4 or 5 adults, always buying the exact same items, always totaling $47.32, always paying with clean cash. Their children were the most unsettling part. Perfectly quiet kids who stood in straight lines behind their parents, never asking for candy or toys, never running around or making noise like normal children do. They'd watch me scan groceries with those same pale blue eyes, and when I'd smile at them, they'd just stare back without expression. After 2 weeks, my regular customers started commenting. "Those weird new families give me the creeps, Mrs." Henderson whispered while I bagged her groceries. I tried saying hello to one of their kids at the park, and the child just walked away without saying anything. "Mr." Thompson complained that the new neighbors never turned on lights in their houses after dark and didn't maintain their yards. "Looks like a ghost town over there," he said. "All those houses look abandoned, but I see people coming and going." But every day, more groups came to shop. Always identical groups, buying identical items, spending exactly $47.32. I started paying closer attention to their shopping patterns. They'd enter the store, split up to collect their items efficiently, then reconvene at my register. They never browsed, never compared prices, never looked at our weekly specials. It was like they were following a precise script that never changed. The groups never mixed or interacted with each other either. If 2 groups were in the store at the same time, they'd move around each other like the other group was invisible. No acknowledgement, no eye contact, no social interaction at all. When I asked my manager Dave about it, he shrugged and said, "Their money was good, and that's all that mattered." But I noticed they never used credit cards or checks, always exact cash, often in those same crisp new bills that felt like they'd never been in anyone's wallet. The breakthrough moment came during my 3rd week of watching them. A little girl, maybe 7 years old, was standing at my register while her mother counted out money. The other adults in their group were bagging groceries, not paying attention to us. I leaned down and whispered, "What's your favorite subject in school, sweetie?" The little girl looked at me with those pale blue eyes and whispered back, "We don't go to school." Her mother's head snapped up immediately. She grabbed the child's hand, abandoned their groceries on my counter, and rushed out of the store with their entire group following behind. They left without taking anything they'd paid for. The next day, that same family returned, but this time they brought 2 additional adults I'd never seen before. All 5 of them surrounded my checkout station while I worked, watching my every movement. They didn't buy anything, didn't speak, just stood there, staring at me for my entire 8-hour shift. Other customers started feeling uncomfortable. Mrs. Martinez left her cart full of groceries and walked out. The college kids who usually joked around with me hurried through their purchases without making eye contact. Dave came over and politely asked the group to leave, but they said they weren't disturbing anyone. Technically, they were right. They stood quietly, didn't block aisles, didn't cause any obvious problems. But their presence made everyone nervous, including me and the other employees. When my shift ended, they followed me out to the parking lot and watched me drive away. The watching continued for a week. Different groups would take shifts, monitoring me during work hours. I started making mistakes at the register, dropping items, forgetting to give customers their change, mixing up orders. My hands would shake when I saw them positioning themselves around my station. My regular customers asked if I was feeling okay, said I seemed scared and distracted. Then Mrs. Henderson pulled me aside during a quiet moment. "Maria, honey, those strange new people have been asking neighbors about you. They wanted to know your work schedule, where you live, if you have family in town." I told them it wasn't any of their business, but they just stared at me with those creepy pale eyes. I told Dave I felt threatened, but he said they hadn't technically done anything illegal. They're not shoplifting, they're not being loud or disruptive. I can't ban customers for standing around. But I could see even Dave was getting nervous. Sales were dropping because regular customers didn't want to shop when the watchers were there. The surveillance escalated outside of work. Groups of them started following me home, walking behind me at exactly 20 feet distance. When I reached my apartment building, they'd positioned themselves across the street, watching my windows. I called the police, but the officer said standing on public sidewalks wasn't a crime unless they were making threats or trying to enter my property. My neighbors started avoiding me. Mrs. Yu, my landlord, knocked on my door and asked if I was involved with some kind of cult or religious group. "Those people only show up when you're around," she said. "Other tenants are complaining. They feel unsafe." I tried explaining the situation, but it sounded crazy even to me. How do you tell someone that you're being watched by dozens of identical-looking families who buy the same groceries every day? Last week, I found a note slipped under my apartment door. Written in neat, careful handwriting, it said, "Join us, Maria. Resistance is temporary." The handwriting was identical to writing I'd seen on shopping lists that some of the groups had dropped in the store. I recognized the way they formed their letters, perfectly uniform, like it was printed by a machine. I called in sick Friday and drove to my sister Carmen's house in Portland for the weekend. I needed space to think, to feel normal again. But when I returned Monday morning, Dave met me in the parking lot with a panicked expression. "Maria, I had to close the store early yesterday. 23 of those families showed up looking for you. They filled the entire store, standing silently in every aisle, waiting for your shift to start. Regular customers took one look and left. I couldn't conduct business with them, just I standing there. I looked through the store windows and saw them, dozens of pale faces in dark clothing, arranged throughout the aisles like mannequins. They weren't shopping, weren't moving, just waiting. All of them turned to look at me when I appeared in the doorway. That's when I knew I had to leave. I quit that day, packed my apartment that night, and moved to Portland permanently to stay with Carmen. She thinks I'm being paranoid, says I let my imagination run wild. But last week, she called me in a panic. "Maria, there's a group of pale people in dark clothes standing outside my house. They're asking neighbors about a woman named Maria who might be visiting." I told them I don't know anyone by that name, but they're still out there. I looked out Carmen's window and saw them, 5 adults and 2 children, standing on the sidewalk across the street. The same pale blue eyes, the same dark clothing, the same perfectly still posture. One of the children looked up at the window where I was standing and smiled. They'd found me again. I don't work in retail anymore. I don't know what those people wanted from me or why they chose me specifically, but I know they're still out there, still watching, still following their precise patterns. Sometimes I wonder if there are other Marias in other cities, other cashiers being watched by other groups of identical families. If you work in customer service, pay attention to your regular customers. Notice when new people start coming in with strange shopping patterns. And if they start watching you, don't ignore it like I did. Don't wait for them to slip notes under your door. Run. Run before they decide resistance really is temporary. My name is Jake Morrison, and I've been working as a barista for 3 years now. Started when I was 19 at a little place downtown, learned everything from pulling the perfect espresso shot to dealing with cranky customers who haven't had their caffeine fix yet. I've worked morning shifts, late nights, weekend rushes, pretty much every situation you can imagine in the coffee business. The pay isn't great, but the tips from college students kept me afloat during my gap year. I figured I'd work at Grind Coffee on Willamette Street until I could get into University of Oregon next fall. Simple plan, decent job, nothing too crazy. But what happened 2 months ago completely changed how I see the world, and I'm starting to think it changed me too. Grind Coffee sits right on Willamette Street, just a few blocks from the university campus. It's one of those cozy places with mismatched furniture, local art on the walls, and the smell of fresh coffee beans that hits you the moment you walk in. We've got about 15 small tables, a long counter with our espresso machine, and big windows that let in the morning light. The place opens at 6 a.m. sharp to catch the early crowd. Professors heading to campus, graduate students pulling all-nighters, and downtown office workers who need their fix before facing another day. I usually work the opening shift, which means I'm there at 5:30 to get everything ready. Turn on the machines, grind the beans, set up the pastry display, count the register. By 6, we're ready for business. The morning regulars know the routine. Most of them have been coming to the same spot for years. There's Dr. Peterson, who teaches chemistry and always orders a double-shot Americano. Sarah from the law office down the street gets a vanilla latte with extra foam. Mike, the construction worker, grabs black coffee and a muffin before heading to whatever job site he's working that day. But 2 months ago, we got a new regular. Guy looked like he was in his 50s, dressed like a professor with the whole tweed jacket and glasses thing. He'd walk in every morning at exactly 6:15, and I mean exactly. I started watching the clock because you could set your watch by this guy. He'd order a large dark roast with 2 sugars, nothing fancy, and then sit at the same corner table for exactly 1 hour. Always brought a stack of papers to grade and a red pen. Never talked to anyone else, just sat there working quietly. What made him stick out wasn't his routine, though. Lots of professors are creatures of habit. It was his hands. They had these dark spots on them, like age spots but much darker. Almost black. The first few times I served him, I figured it was just normal aging stuff. My grandpa had spots on his hands too, but these seemed different somehow. More distinct, perfectly round, and really dark against his pale skin. The guy seemed nice enough. Always said please and thank you, never complained about anything, left decent tips. He had this quiet way about him, like he was completely focused on whatever he was grading. Sometimes I'd see him making notes in the margins of papers, shaking his head or nodding slightly. Just a normal professor doing normal professor things. But after the first week, I started noticing the spots were spreading. Not like they were getting bigger exactly, but there were more of them. They'd moved from just his fingers to covering most of his hands. By the second week, they were creeping up his wrists. Dark, perfectly round spots that looked almost like they'd been stamped on his skin. I mentioned it to Lisa, our manager, during a slow afternoon. She told me not to stare at customers and definitely not to ask about medical conditions. Fair enough. It wasn't really my business anyway. Lots of people have skin problems, and it's not like he was bothering anyone. He kept to himself, didn't make noise, bought coffee every day. Perfect customer, really. Except other customers started noticing too. I'd see people glance over at his table, then quickly look away. A few regulars started choosing tables on the opposite side of the shop. Nobody said anything directly, but you could feel this weird tension in the air whenever he was there. People would lower their voices when they walked past his table. By the third week, the dark spots had connected into larger patches covering his entire hands and wrists. They weren't flat anymore either. They looked raised, almost textured, like tree bark or reptile scales. And they'd started appearing on his neck too. Just small ones at first, but definitely the same dark, raised patches. One morning while I was refilling his coffee, I accidentally brushed against his hand when setting the cup down. His skin felt completely wrong, rough and hard, like touching a piece of bark or a rock. It startled me so much I nearly dropped the coffee pot. He looked up and noticed my reaction. "Don't worry," he said, holding up one of his hands and examining the dark patches. "It's not contagious." But his voice sounded different than before. Raspier, like his throat was dry or changing somehow. He smiled when he said it, but the smile looked strange too. His teeth seemed sharper than I remembered. The next week brought more changes. Instead of his usual dark roast, he started ordering herbal teas. When I asked if he wanted to try a different coffee blend, he shook his head. "Coffee's too acidic for my condition now," he explained. "But I still like coming here. It's peaceful." His condition had definitely gotten worse. The dark patches now covered his entire face, neck, and hands. His eyes looked different too, yellower than before, and the pupils seemed more vertical, like a cat's eyes, or maybe a snake's. Other customers were definitely getting uncomfortable. Mrs. Henderson, who'd been coming in for morning coffee for 5 years, actually came up to the counter and complained. "That man is scaring people," she whispered, nodding toward his table. "Several of us have been talking about it. Can't you ask him to leave?" I told her I'd mention it to Lisa, but honestly, what were we supposed to do? The guy wasn't breaking any rules. He bought drinks, sat quietly, and minded his own business. We couldn't kick someone out for having a skin condition. But Lisa felt the pressure too. During our staff meeting that week, she asked me to suggest gently that he might be more comfortable ordering takeout instead of staying in the shop. I dreaded having that conversation. But the next morning, when he came in for his tea, I brought it up as carefully as I could. "Hey, so, I was thinking," I started, wiping down the counter nervously. "Some customers have been, mentioning that they're concerned about your skin condition. I know it's not contagious, but maybe you'd prefer getting your tea to go? Just until people get used to seeing. Are you around?" He looked at me for a long moment, then started laughing. Not a mean laugh, but definitely amused. "I'll be done with the transition soon," he said. "Just a few more days, and it won't matter anymore." "Transition?" I asked. He just smiled that sharp-toothed smile and said, "You'll understand when you're older, Jake." How did he know my name? I wore a name tag, sure, but something about the way he said it felt personal, like he'd been watching me specifically. That Friday, for the first time in weeks, he didn't show up at 6:15. The whole morning felt off without his routine presence. Saturday morning was the same, impressed, no sign of him at all. When I came in Sunday to open up, I found a note taped to our front door. My name was written on the outside in shaky handwriting that looked more like scratches than actual letters. Inside, the note just said, "Thank you for your patience, Jake. The process is almost complete." Monday morning arrived gray and drizzly, typical Eugene weather. I went through my usual opening routine, machines on, beans ground, register counted. At exactly 6:15, someone knocked on our front door. Through the glass, I could see a tall figure wearing what looked like the professor's usual clothes. But something was very wrong with the proportions. The person was much taller than before, and their arms hung down way too far, almost like they'd been stretched. I walked over and unlocked the door, and that's when I saw what the professor had become over the weekend. His entire body was covered in dark, bark-like scales that seemed to shift and move when he breathed. His eyes were bright yellow with vertical slits for pupils. His fingers had grown longer and ended in what could only be described as claws. When he moved, the scales made a soft rustling sound, like leaves in the wind. "One last cup of tea before I leave town," he said, and his voice sounded like rustling leaves mixed with wind through trees. My hands were shaking as I made his usual herbal tea. I tried not to look directly at him, but I could hear his movements, fluid and strange, like he was gliding instead of walking. When I brought the tea to his table, the chair groaned under his weight, even though he looked like he should be lighter, not heavier. The few other early customers took one look at him and immediately left. Mrs. Henderson actually ran out, leaving her purse behind. He sat at his corner table for exactly 1 hour, just like always. But instead of grading papers, he just sat there watching me work. Those yellow eyes followed my every movement. Finally, he stood up. His movements were completely fluid now, serpentine. He walked to the counter and placed a $20 bill down. "The process is complete," he said, those yellow eyes fixed on mine. "Some of us aren't meant to stay human forever, Jake. Remember that." He turned and walked out, but his gait was wrong. Instead, he had footsteps. He seemed to glide across the floor, like he was floating just slightly above the ground. Through the window, I watched him move down Willamette Street with that same gliding motion until he disappeared around the corner. That was 6 weeks ago. He never came back to grind coffee, but 3 weeks after he left, I started noticing small dark spots on my own hands. Right where I'd touched his skin that day, when I accidentally brushed against his hand, refilling his coffee. They started as tiny marks, just a few spots on my fingertips that I figured were coffee stains. But they didn't wash off, no matter how hard I scrubbed. Lisa said they were probably just from handling coffee beans all day, but I know the difference between stains and whatever these are. The spots have been growing. Slowly, but definitely growing. They're spreading from my fingertips toward my wrists, just like what happened to the professor. They feel different than normal skin, too, slightly, raised and rougher. I've been documenting it, taking pictures every day. The progression is exactly the same as what I watched happen to him over those weeks. Dark spots that connect into patches, skin that gets rougher and harder. Last week, I caught myself ordering herbal tea instead of coffee during my break. Coffee has been tasting too acidic lately, hurting my throat. And my voice sounds different in the mornings, raspier, like something's changing. I'm writing this because I'm scared I'm starting the same transition the professor went through. I don't know what's happening to me, and I don't know how to stop it. The spots are spreading faster now, and I swear my fingernails look sharper than they used to. Sometimes I catch myself staring at the corner table where he used to sit, wondering if I'll end up like him. Wondering if whatever he became is what I'm becoming too. The worst part is, I'm not sure I want to stop it anymore. There's something peaceful about the idea of completing the transition, just like he said. Maybe some of us really aren't meant to stay human forever. My name is Rebecca Martinez, and I've been working housekeeping in Oregon hotels for 11 years. Started at a Motel 6 inches southeast Portland when I was 18, moved up to the Red Lion in Salem, then head housekeeper at the Shiloh Inn in Lincoln City before taking this job at the Ocean View Inn in Seaside 3 years ago. I've cleaned blood out of carpet, scraped human waste off bathroom walls, and found things in rooms that would make your stomach turn. I thought the worst part of this job was dealing with what living people could do to a hotel room. I was wrong. Dead wrong. The Ocean View Inn sits on a bluff at the north end of Seaside, built in 1924 during Oregon's first tourism boom. 4 stories, 68 rooms, most with ocean views that keep guests coming back. The building's got character, hardwood floors that creak, big windows facing the Pacific, thick walls that muffle the constant wind. During summer, we're booked solid with families from Portland, California. Off-season, we get regulars who've been coming here for decades. My supervisor, Janet Kowalski, has been here 15 years. Started in housekeeping like me, worked her way up to operations manager. Janet knows every pipe, every electrical outlet, every room's quirks. Room 237 has a heater that only works on the highest setting. Room 115's bathroom door sticks in humid weather. Room 302's window faces east, so guests always complain about morning sun. Janet taught me that attention to these details separates good housekeeping from great housekeeping. But room 237 was always different. Corner room on the second floor with windows facing both ocean and town. Should be popular, but guests check out early more than any other room. They complain about nightmares, feeling watched, hearing voices. The room stays cold even with heat cranked up. Guests find their belongings moved around. Last year, a family from Bend claimed they woke up to find their 7-year-old daughter standing at the window, speaking in a language none of them recognized. Management keeps 237 available but warns front desk staff it needs special attention. Janet told me some guests report seeing geometric patterns in the wallpaper that weren't there when they checked in. Others say the room's layout seems different when they wake up, like the furniture moved overnight. Rooms have histories, Rebecca, Janet explained during my first week. This building's seen almost a century of visitors. Some leave more behind than just dirty towels. 3 weeks ago, a guest in 237 checked out at 3 a.m., claiming the room was trying to teach him things. He left in such a panic that hotel security found his rental car keys still on the nightstand, along with a leather journal. Janet sent me up for the final clean and to collect forgotten items. The journal made my hands shake the moment I touched it. Thick brown leather, pages filled with geometric drawings that hurt to look at directly. Impossible angles and shapes that seemed to move when I wasn't focused on them. Written notes describe dreams about vast intelligences, communicating through mathematical equations. The handwriting got increasingly frantic toward the end. "Janet," I said, finding her in the supply closet, "you need to see this." She glanced at the journal, barely opening it. "Lost and found, Rebecca. Just like everything else. But these drawings are not our problem." Janet's tone shut down discussion. "Guests left it behind. We hold it 90 days, then dispose of it. That's policy." That night, I took the journal home to my apartment on Avenue U. I couldn't stop thinking about those patterns. I spread the pages across my kitchen table under the overhead light, studying each drawing. The geometric shapes seemed to rearrange themselves when I looked away, forming new configurations. The written notes described dreams of floating in space, surrounded by enormous structures made of living mathematics. Around 2 a.m., exhaustion hit me like a truck. I fell asleep at the table, journal open in front of me. The dream was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. I floated in absolute darkness, surrounded by massive geometric structures that pulsed with their own light. Voices spoke in languages that predated human civilization, but somehow I understood every word. They explained that Earth was a monitoring station for entities existing between dimensions. Humanity was an accidental byproduct of their reality manipulation experiments. I woke up exhausted but strangely enlightened, like I'd learned profound truths my conscious mind couldn't quite grasp. At work that morning, I started noticing things I'd missed before. The wallpaper patterns in hallways formed larger designs when viewed correctly. The hotel's layout wasn't random. Room placements and hallway configurations created specific geometric relationships. During my lunch break, I sketched the floor plan from memory. When I compared it to the journal's drawings, my pencil fell from numb fingers. Perfect match. The Ocean View Inn wasn't just a hotel. It was a communication device built to specific architectural requirements. Room 237 was the focal point where guests received transmissions from interdimensional entities. Janet, I cornered her by the service elevator. How much do you know about this building's construction? It was built in 1924. Why? Who designed it? Who chose the floor plan? Janet studied my face. Rebecca, you look terrible. Are you sleeping? The architect, Janet. Who was the architect? She sighed. Some guy named Marsh. Ezekiel Marsh built several hotels along the Oregon coast in the 20s. Why does it matter? That evening, I researched Ezekiel Marsh at the Seaside Library. Born 1887, died 1925 inches, the Oregon State Hospital for the Insane. The Oregonian archives showed he'd designed 7 hotels along the coast, all with similar geometric floor plans. All reported high incidents of guest complaints about nightmares and supernatural experiences. Marsh had been committed after claiming he received architectural instructions from cosmic intelligences in his dreams. I started volunteering to clean 237 every day. Janet thought I was being helpful, but I needed to understand what those guests experienced. The room felt different immediately, air thicker, a constant low humming the heating system couldn't explain. My vacuum cleaner shut off randomly. Cleaning supplies moved to different locations than where I'd left them. More disturbing were the changes in the guests staying in other rooms. Mrs. Patterson in 115 called the front desk, reporting dreams about civilizations existing before stars formed. Mr. Thompson in 302 woke up speaking mathematical formulas he couldn't understand. Little Emma Davies in 201 drew pictures of alien cities that perfectly matched the journal's architectural diagrams. Rebecca. Janet pulled me aside after my second week of 237 duty. Guests are complaining about nightmares throughout the hotel. What's going on? I don't know what you mean. 7 families have checked out early this week. 7. They're all reporting the same thing. Geometric dreams, hearing voices, feeling watched. This isn't normal. Janet was right, but I couldn't tell her the truth. How do you explain that you've been chosen as a conduit for interdimensional communication? That you've been leaving copies of journal pages in rooms throughout the hotel? Because that's exactly what I'd been doing. Each night, I made photocopies of the most important drawings using the hotel's office printer. I slipped them into guest information folders, tucked them behind bathroom mirrors, left them in nightstand drawers. The geometric patterns were spreading, creating a network of human receivers. The changes in myself were becoming impossible to hide. I rarely slept, or felt hungry. My reflection in mirrors sometimes showed geometric patterns overlaying my face like a second skin. I could see mathematical equations floating around other people, describing their thoughts and emotions in precise calculations. During my 3rd week of exposure to 237, the humming sounds became comprehensible. They weren't random noise, they were voices, conducting calculations about reality itself. Our universe was a mathematical equation being solved by incomprehensibly vast minds. Earth was one variable in a cosmic calculation spanning billions of years and dimensions. Rebecca. Janet's voice startled me. I was standing in the middle of 237, journal open in my hands, speaking equations aloud. What are you doing? Learning, I said, though my voice sounded wrong, like multiple people speaking at once. They're teaching me. Janet stepped backward. Teaching you what? That we're being watched, evaluated. Humanity exists under cosmic bias, observation, and the entities are deciding if we're ready for contact. "You're scaring me, Rebecca. I think you need help." But Janet didn't understand. None of them did. The entities had placed monitoring stations throughout human history, disguised as buildings that drew large numbers of people. Hotels, hospitals, schools, anywhere human minds gathered and were vulnerable to influence during sleep. Most humans who experienced contact went insane because their brains couldn't process the information. But some could handle limited exposure and become conduits. Ezekiel Marsh had been one. Now I was another. "Janet," I said, moving toward her, "look at the journal. See what I've seen. Stay away from me." Janet backed toward the door. "You're not yourself. I'm more myself than I've ever been. The cosmic voices are showing me humanity's true purpose. We're an experiment, Janet, a test to see if random chaos can produce meaningful patterns." Janet ran from the room. Within an hour, she'd called hotel management, and my shift was terminated. Security escorted me from the building, but they couldn't take the knowledge I'd gained. They couldn't stop what I'd already set in motion. That night, I drove back to the Ocean View Inn, used my maintenance key to enter through the service entrance. The hotel was alive with cosmic energy, every room containing guests who'd been exposed to the geometric patterns. Their dreams were synchronizing, creating a collective receiver for interdimensional communication. I made my way to 237, journal in hand. The humming was now a symphony of cosmic voices. They showed me equations describing human consciousness, formulas predicting our species' future. The entities existed in spaces between dimensions, vast intelligences experiencing time differently than humans. To them, our civilization was a brief flicker, but they were fascinated by our chaotic creativity. They'd been gradually introducing their presence through dreams and visions, preparing us for eventual contact. The monitoring stations along the Oregon coast were part of a global network, each one testing humanity's readiness for cosmic truth. The door opened behind me. Janet stood there with 2 security guards and a man I didn't recognize. "Rebecca," Janet said softly, "this is Dr. Morrison from the County Mental Health Office. We want to help you." "You can't help me," I said, still facing the window. "I've seen too much. The geometric patterns are reproducing in minds across the hotel. Within days, enough people will be ready for direct communication." Dr. Morrison stepped forward. "Rebecca, you're experiencing a psychological break. The journal you found triggered something, but these cosmic entities aren't real." I turned to face them, and all 3 stepped backward. My reflection in the window showed geometric patterns covering my entire face, equations flowing like living text across my skin. "Look outside," I said. "Really, look." They followed my gaze through the window. In the pre-dawn darkness, lights were appearing along the Oregon coastline. Not electric lights, geometric patterns glowing in the sky above every hotel, every building Ezekiel Marsh had designed. The monitoring stations were activating. "It's beginning," I whispered, "humanity's final evaluation." Dr. Morrison was speaking into his radio, requesting immediate backup. Janet was crying. The security guards had their hands on their weapons, though what good bullets would do against interdimensional mathematics, I couldn't say. I opened the journal to its final page. New writing had appeared overnight, not in Ezekiel Marsh's handwriting, but in mine. Equations I'd written while sleeping. Formulas describing the transformation of human consciousness. "We are not alone," I read aloud. "We never were alone. Cosmic intelligences have been observing humanity since our species began, waiting for us to evolve enough to receive direct communication. The monitoring stations along this coast are humanity's final examination. Pass, and we join a cosmic community spanning dimensions. Fail, and we're reset to begin evolution again." The lights outside were growing brighter. Other hotels along the coast were reporting similar incidents. Guests speaking in unison, geometric patterns appearing on walls, staff members transformed into conduits. The network was expanding exponentially. Dr. Morrison grabbed my arm. "Rebecca, we're taking you to the hospital." I looked at him with eyes that now saw mathematical equations describing his fear, his confusion, his desperate need to rationalize the impossible. "Doctor," I said gently, "you can't hospitalize cosmic truth. The evaluation has begun. In 72 hours, every monitoring station on Earth will activate simultaneously. Humanity will face its creators and discover whether we're ready for the next phase of existence. As They led me from room 237. I could hear the cosmic voices singing equations of unimaginable beauty. The Ocean View Inn had fulfilled its purpose. The test was beginning, and somewhere in the space between dimensions, vast intelligences were watching Oregon's coast with the focused attention of scientists observing their most important experiment ever. The truth about humanity's place in the universe was about to be revealed. Whether we were ready or not, 3 days later, every person who'd stayed at the Ocean View Inn during my time there would begin speaking the same mathematical equations in their sleep. The cosmic evaluation had begun, and there was no going back. We were never alone. We were never free. And now, finally, we were about to learn what that really meant. My name is Marcus Kim, and I've been running my family's Korean barbecue cart in downtown Portland for 3 years now. My parents started this business when I was in high school, working 16-hour days to build something from nothing. After college, I came back to help them expand. We're not just another food cart. We make everything from scratch, marinate our bulgogi for 24 hours, and hand-cut our vegetables every morning. I've served thousands of customers, learned every regular's usual order, and built relationships that keep people coming back week after week. But what happened last month in Portland's Food Pod district changed everything I thought I knew about identity and reality. I'm not even sure I'm the real Marcus anymore. Our cart sits on Alder Street in one of Portland's busiest food pods. 15 other carts surround us in a converted parking lot. Tacos, pizza, burgers, coffee, you name it. We serve the lunch crowd from 11 to 2, then the dinner rush from 5 to 9. The late-night customers are mostly drunk people, wanting something greasy, but they tip well. My girlfriend Nina works the evening shift with me while I handle the daytime orders alone. We've got our system down perfect. I work the grill, she handles the register and talks to customers. Nina's great with people, remembers their names, asks about their kids, makes everyone feel welcome. The food cart business is tough. You're competing with every restaurant in the city, plus 14 other carts right next to you. Weather affects everything. Rain keeps customers away, heat makes working over a grill miserable. The health department shows up without warning. Equipment breaks down at the worst times, but we've survived because people trust us. They know Marcus at the Korean barbecue cart. They know our food is good and we treat them right. Last month started normal. Tuesday morning, I was prepping vegetables when Mrs. Chen came by for her usual beef bowl, extra kimchi, no rice. She's been coming here for 2 years, always orders the same thing. But instead of her normal greeting, she looked confused. "Marcus, I didn't know you worked at other places too," she said, counting out exact change like always. "What do you mean? This is the only place I work. But I bought tacos from you yesterday at that cart near Pioneer Square. You made that joke about Korean tacos being fusion food. I laughed it off. Must have been someone who looks like me. Happens all the time." But Mrs. Chen shook her head. "No, it was definitely you. Same voice, same laugh. You even mentioned your girlfriend Nina when I asked how business was going. That bothered me, but I figured it was just a mistake. Portland's full of young Asian guys working food carts. People mix us up sometimes, even though it's annoying." Then it happened again. Thursday, my regular customer Dave came by looking confused. "Hey Marcus, I tried to find your cart yesterday, but ended up at some pizza place downtown. The guy working there looked exactly like you, but he was selling pepperoni slices." "Wasn't me, Dave. I was here all day." "Weird." He knew my name though, asked about my job at Nike, just like you always do. Friday brought 3 more customers with similar stories. Sarah said she'd bought coffee from me at a cart in the Pearl District. Tom claimed he'd gotten a breakfast burrito from me near the waterfront. Each time, they described someone who looked exactly like me, knew their names, and had conversations about things only I would know. Nina thought it was just coincidence. "Maybe you've got one of those faces," she said while cleaning the grill. "People think they see you everywhere because you're so memorable." But the descriptions were too specific. These customers weren't talking about someone who sort of looked like me. They were describing my exact appearance, my voice, my mannerisms. They quoted conversations I'd supposedly had while serving them at carts I'd never visited. I started asking for details. What was this other Marcus wearing? What did he say exactly? How did he act? The answers scared me. Every customer described my exact facial expressions, the way I flip my hair when I'm thinking, how I always ask, "How's it going today?" before taking orders. They remembered jokes I would make, opinions I would have, knowledge about Korean food that only I possessed. Monday morning, my regular customer Tom came by with his phone out. "Marcus, you're going to think this is crazy, but look at this photo." He showed me a picture on his screen. There I was, standing behind a breakfast cart, wearing a red apron I'd never owned, smiling next to Tom like we'd been friends for years. "When was this taken?" "Yesterday morning. You made me this amazing breakfast sandwich, and we talked for like 10 minutes about Korean cooking techniques. You told me about this fermentation process for kimchi that takes 3 weeks." My mouth went dry. I do know that fermentation process. It's something my grandmother taught me. But I'd never met Tom anywhere except at our Alder Street location. "I was here yesterday morning, prepping for the Monday rush." "Tom, I was working here yesterday." "Nina can confirm it." "Then who's this?" He pointed at the photo. The person in the image had my face, my voice. I could hear it in my memory of our conversation and knowledge that only I should have. That afternoon, Nina and I decided to investigate. We closed early and drove to the breakfast cart Tom had mentioned. The owner, a middle-aged guy with flour on his apron, was cleaning his equipment. "Excuse me," I said. "I'm looking for Marcus, the guy who worked here yesterday." The owner looked at me strangely. "You're Marcus." "No, I mean the other Marcus. The one who made breakfast sandwiches yesterday." "That was you, buddy. You worked here yesterday morning, then quit without notice. Said you had to go back to your family's business." Nina and I exchanged looks. "Can you describe the guy who worked here?" "Same height as you, same face, same voice. Asian kid, early 20s, knew a lot about Korean food. Even had the same name. He studied my face. You feeling okay? Did you hit your head or something?" We asked to see security footage. The owner reluctantly showed us his camera system, scrolling back to yesterday morning. There on the screen was someone who looked exactly like me, working the breakfast cart with confidence, talking to customers, even laughing at the same jokes I would make. But it wasn't me. I'd never been to this cart, never applied for work there, never quit a job I never had. We visited 3 more locations where customers claimed to have seen me: Pioneer Square Taco Cart, Pearl District Coffee Stand, Waterfront Burger Truck. Each owner confirmed they'd recently employed someone named Marcus who looked exactly like me. All of these Marcus employees had quit their jobs within the past week. The security footage from each location showed the same impossible thing. Perfect copies of me working different jobs, serving different food, having conversations with customers using knowledge and personality traits that were uniquely mine. Nina was getting scared. "This is like someone is collecting copies of you," she said as we drove back to our cart. "But that's impossible." That evening, while we worked the dinner rush, I saw myself walking past on the sidewalk. The other Marcus was wearing jeans and a black jacket I didn't own, but he had my exact face, my build, my way of walking. He made eye contact with me through the service window and smiled. Not a friendly smile, but a knowing one, like we shared a secret. I dropped the spatula I was holding. "Nina, do you see that?" She followed my gaze, but the other Marcus had already disappeared into the crowd of downtown pedestrians. "See what?" "Me." I just saw myself walk past the cart. Nina grabbed my arm. "Marcus, you're scaring me. Maybe we should call the police." Over the next week, I started seeing multiple versions of myself around downtown Portland. Sometimes 2 or 3 Marcus copies would be visible on the same street, walking in different directions, dressed differently, going about what looked like normal daily activities. One was working as a barista at a coffee shop on Morrison. Another was delivering food on a bike, wearing a bright green jacket. A third was selling flowers at Pioneer Courthouse Square. When I approached them, they would acknowledge me with those same knowing nods, but they never spoke or explained what was happening. Customers at our cart began asking why I was working so many different jobs around the city. Some were confused about which Marcus they'd interacted with previously. Mrs. Chen stopped coming altogether, Dave asked. If I had a twin brother, then seemed unsatisfied with my answer. Our regular customers started avoiding us. The lunch rush dwindled. People would walk past, see me working the grill, and change direction without ordering. The situation was becoming too weird, as one customer told Nina before leaving. Nina quit working with me after she saw two Marcus copies having lunch together at a restaurant across the street. She was afraid that whatever was happening to me might happen to her next. "What if I start seeing copies of myself?" she asked, packing up her apron. "What if I don't know which Nina is real?" Last week, I found a note taped to our cart after closing. Written in my own handwriting were the words, "Thanks for being the template, the collective." I stared at that note for an hour. The handwriting was definitely mine. Same slant, same way I write the letter M, same pressure from the pen. But I hadn't written it. I would remember writing something that, strange. I've seen 17 different versions of myself around Portland since then. They're all living separate lives but using my face and identity. Some work food service jobs, others have different careers entirely. I saw one Marcus in a business suit getting into a car. Another was walking a dog in Laurelhurst Park. Yesterday was the worst day yet. My parents called, confused and angry. "Marcus, why didn't you tell us you were coming to dinner?" my mom asked. "I wasn't. I've been working the cart all week." "But you were here Sunday night. You brought flowers and helped your father fix the sink. We talked about expanding the business." My blood went cold. "Mom, I wasn't there Sunday night. I was at Nina's apartment." There was a long pause. "The Marcus who came to dinner knew things only you would know. He remembered your grandmother's kimchi recipe, talked about the customer who gives us trouble, even mentioned that girl you dated in college." My parents now think I'm the imposter because the copy who visited them knew family details I'd apparently forgotten. When I went to their house to explain, they looked at me like I was a stranger wearing their son's face. "Which Marcus are you?" my father asked, standing in the doorway without inviting me in. I'm writing this sitting in our food cart at 3 in the morning, the only time I feel safe anymore. The downtown streets are empty, except for the occasional police car and a few homeless people. Our refrigerator hums. The overhead lights buzz. Everything feels normal, except for the fact that I don't know if I'm the original Marcus or just another copy that thinks he's real. Maybe I'm the 17th copy, created with all of Marcus Kim's memories, believing I've been running this cart for 3 years. Maybe the real Marcus is living a different life somewhere else in Portland, wondering who's stolen his identity. Maybe we're all copies, and the original Marcus disappeared weeks ago. I keep touching my face, looking in mirrors, trying to find some sign that I'm not real. But I feel real. My memories feel real. The burn scar on my left hand from when I was learning to use the grill feels real. Tomorrow, I'm going to pack up the cart and leave Portland. Maybe in another city, I'll be the only Marcus again. Maybe the copies will stay here, living their separate lives with my face. Or maybe I'll arrive in Seattle or San Francisco and find 17 other Marcus copies already there, waiting for me with those knowing smiles, ready to welcome another member to their collective. I don't know which Marcus I am anymore, but I know I can't stay here and watch my identity dissolve into an army of identical strangers wearing my face. My name is Danny Morrison, and 3 months ago, I stopped sleeping through the night. Every sound outside my apartment, a car door, wind in the trees, even my neighbor's dog sends ice through my veins. I've been a timber faller for Pacific Timber Company for 6 years, and I thought I understood fear. I'd seen guys crushed by widowmakers, watched chainsaws kick back and take fingers, felt the earth shake when 200-foot giants came crashing down. But fear of getting hurt on the job? That's clean fear. Honest fear. What I experienced in the deep Tillamook forest wasn't fear at all. It was the slow, creeping realization that we were never the apex predators we thought we were. I need to tell someone what really happened out there, because the official reports are lies. Pacific Timber buried the truth. The Forest Service won't return my calls, and my crew, what's left of us, we don't talk about it. Can't talk about it. But I can't carry this alone anymore. Maybe if I say it out loud, write it down, get it out of my head, maybe the dreams will stop. Maybe I'll stop checking my locks 15 times before bed, stop scanning tree lines for shapes that shouldn't be there. Maybe I'll stop feeling like I'm still being watched. We were working the Henderson Creek site, 23 miles into the Tillamook National Forest down logging roads that barely qualify as roads. It's the kind of remote that city people can't understand. No cell service, no GPS, Nothing but trees and mountains and silence so thick it presses against your eardrums. We camp on site during the week, 6 guys and a cook in a cluster of tents around our equipment staging area, only going home to our families on weekends. Jake Brennan was our foreman, a 30-year veteran who knew every sound the Oregon woods make. Big Mike Kowalski ran our skidder, a mountain of a man who could operate heavy machinery like it was an extension of his body. Tommy Velasco and Steve Chen handled delimbing, stripping branches off fallen trees with mechanical precision. Carlos Ruiz managed loading, getting massive logs onto transport trucks. And me, I was primary faller, the guy who decides which way a tree falls and whether we all go home with the same number of limbs we came with. Our cook was Maggie Finch, a tough 60-year-old woman who'd been feeding logging crews for 2 decades. She kept our camp running, cooked meals that made the hard work bearable, and had a sixth sense about weather and forest conditions that even Jake respected. Maggie had worked camps all over the Pacific Northwest, and she'd heard every story, every local legend, every piece of folklore that loggers pass around campfires. The Henderson Creek site was different from the start. We all felt it, but nobody wanted to say anything. You don't last long in logging if you develop a reputation for being spooked by shadows. But the forest felt attentive, like it was watching us, learning our routines, cataloging our weaknesses. Our first week was normal enough. We cleared the access roads, set up our staging area, began the systematic process of bringing down trees that had been growing since before America was a country. But even during those first days, small things felt wrong. Birds would go silent for hours at a time, creating pockets of dead air that made our chainsaw engines sound unnaturally loud. Our equipment ran rougher than usual. Chainsaws that had been perfectly tuned would bog down in green wood. Hydraulic lines developed minor leaks that shouldn't have happened. Maggie noticed it first. "Animals are acting strange," she told Jake on our 4th day. "Haven't seen a single deer or elk track near camp. Even the squirrels are gone. In 30 years of cooking for camps, I've never seen wildlife avoid an area like this." Jake shrugged it off. "We're making noise, cutting trees. Animals avoid active logging sites. Nothing unusual about that." But Maggie wasn't convinced, and neither was I. The silence wasn't normal. It felt deliberate. On our 8th day, we heard the first howl. It came at dusk, just as we were finishing dinner around our camp stove. A deep, resonant call that seemed to come from massive lungs and vocal cords much larger than any animal I knew. The sound echoed through the valleys for what felt like minutes, bouncing off ridgelines and seeming to come from multiple directions at once. "Elk," Jake said immediately. "Bull elk marking territory." But his voice carried uncertainty. Jake had been hunting elk for 25 years, and this didn't sound like any elk call he'd ever heard. The pitch was too low, the duration too long, and there was something else, a structure to it, like it was communicating something specific rather than just announcing presence. The howling continued every evening for a week. Always at dusk, always from different directions, always with that unsettling quality that made our teeth ache and our primitive brainstems send up warning flares. Tommy started sleeping with his headphones on, claiming the sound gave him nightmares. Steve began taking anxiety medication he'd never needed before. Big Mike, who'd never shown fear of anything in his life, started jumping at sudden noises. But it was Carlos who broke first. "We need to leave," he said on our 15th day, his voice shaking as another howl echoed across the mountains. "Whatever's making that sound, it's not natural, it's wrong." "It's just an animal," Jake insisted, but his conviction was cracking. Big animal, maybe injured, maybe sick. But just an animal. "Animals don't sound like that," Maggie said quietly. "And animals don't make equipment malfunction the way ours has been." She was right. Our machinery had been developing problems that made no mechanical sense. Chainsaws would lose power mid-cut for no reason, then run perfectly minutes later. Our skidder's GPS would show our location as places that didn't exist, coordinates that put us in the middle of the Pacific Ocean or underground. The satellite radio crackled with voices, speaking languages that didn't sound human, conversations in clicks and growls that lasted for hours. On day 16, we found the first footprint. I was doing my morning equipment check when I saw it in the soft earth near our water supply. A print so large I initially thought it was where someone had dug a hole and forgotten to fill it in. But as I crouched down for a closer look, I could see the distinct outline of toes, the arch of a foot, the heel impression. The print was 22 inches long. "Jake," I called, my voice cracking. "You need to see this." Jake came over and stared at the print for a full minute without speaking. When he finally looked up at me, his face had gone gray. "That's not human," he whispered. "And it's not bear, elk, or anything else that lives in these woods." We followed the rough trail and found more prints, each one pressed deep into earth that barely showed our boot marks. The stride length was over 8 feet, impossible for any human, too long for a bear walking on hind legs. Whatever made these tracks was massive, bipedal, and heavy enough to leave clear impressions in ground that was nearly frozen. But it was the pattern that made my blood turn to ice water. The prints didn't wander randomly like an animal foraging or traveling. They circled our camp in perfect concentric rings, getting closer with each pass. Whatever had been watching us wasn't just curious, it was studying us, learning our layout, planning something. That night, the howling started earlier and sounded much closer. Instead of distant calls from ridge lines, we could hear them coming from maybe 50 yards away, just beyond the range of our work lights. As darkness fell, we heard footsteps, not the light pad of deer or the heavy shuffle of bears, but deliberate, measured steps that shook the ground with each impact. Jake grabbed his rifle and fired a warning shot into the air. The forest went completely silent, not just quiet silent. No insects, no wind in the trees, no small animals rustling in the underbrush, nothing. The silence was so complete it felt like being underwater, like the forest had died around us. For exactly 10 minutes, we sat in that dead quiet, our own breathing sounding unnaturally loud. Then the howling erupted from multiple directions at once. At least 6 massive voices joined in a coordinated chorus that made our bones vibrate and our camp stove flame flicker. This wasn't random animal calls anymore, this was communication. They were talking to each other, and the message was clear. The warning shot had been received and rejected. We huddled in our tents that night, listening to footsteps circle our camp in patterns that grew tighter with each pass. Whatever was out there was big enough that we could feel the ground shake with each step, smart enough to stay just beyond our light, and organized enough to coordinate their movements. Around midnight, something began testing our tents. Not violent shaking, but careful, methodical pressure against the fabric walls, like something was learning the tensile strength of our shelter, figuring out exactly how much force would be needed to tear through. We could hear sniffing outside, deep inhalations that went on for 30 seconds at a time, like something was memorizing our individual scents. Then came the sounds that still wake me up screaming. Voices. Human voices, but wrong. Speaking in perfect English, but the vocal cords, producing the words, were too large, the resonance too deep. They were repeating things we'd said during the day, conversations between crew members, instructions Jake had given, even Maggie's comments about the food. "Check the hydraulic fluid on the Delimber," came Steve's voice from outside his tent. Even Herful Daff, though Steve was inside, hyperventilating with terror. "Weather's supposed to turn tomorrow," said Maggie's voice from the darkness, while the real Maggie sobbed quietly in her sleeping bag. "We need to hit our quota this week," came Jake's voice from multiple directions at once, overlapping and echoing like a broken recording. They had been listening to us, learning our voices, practicing. Dawn couldn't come fast enough. When the first gray light filtered through the trees, the voices stopped and the footsteps faded into the forest. We emerged from our tents to find handprint impressions in the dirt around every shelter. The prints were human-shaped but enormous, nearly twice the size of a normal person's hand. Each fingerprint was clearly visible, showing whorl patterns identical to human prints but scaled up to impossible proportions. What terrified me most was their placement. The handprints were positioned exactly where our heads had been while we slept, as if something had been crouched beside each tent, reaching out to touch the fabric just inches from our faces. That morning, Jake tried to radio our supervisor. The satellite radio crackled to life, but instead of reaching Pacific Timber's dispatcher, we heard our own voices from the night before, played back with perfect clarity. Every word we'd spoken, every whispered prayer, every sob of fear, all of it recorded and transmitted back to us in a mocking loop. Carlos broke completely. He started running toward the access road, abandoning his gear, and screaming about needing to get home to his family. Tommy and Steve chased after him, leaving Jake, Big Mike, Maggie, and me alone in camp. "We pack up today," Jake said, his authority finally cracking. "Leave the big equipment, take what we can carry. This isn't worth dying for." But when we went to gather our personal gear, we found it had been rearranged. Every item we owned, clothes, toiletries, food, tools, had been sorted into precise geometric patterns around our campsite. Our belongings formed spirals and concentric circles, arranged with mathematical precision that would have taken hours to complete. But we'd been in our tents all night, listening to voices and footsteps and the sound of our own terror. They had been in our camp while we cowered in our shelters. They had touched our things, organized our lives, demonstrated that our defenses were meaningless. Big Mike found his family photos arranged in a perfect line leading into the forest, like breadcrumbs on a trail. Each photo had been carefully removed from his wallet and placed face up on the ground, spaced exactly 3 feet apart, extending into the darkness between the trees. "They want us to follow," Maggie whispered. "This is an invitation." "We don't follow invitations from things that mimic our voices," Jake said, but his hands were shaking as he gathered his scattered belongings. As we packed our essential gear, abandoning thousands of dollars in company equipment, the forest around us began to change. Trees that had been standing straight when we made camp were now bent at impossible angles, creating archways and tunnels that led deeper into the woods. The trail we'd used to access the site had vanished entirely, replaced by multiple paths that branched and twisted in directions that hurt to look at. Our compass spun wildly, unable to find magnetic north. Our GPS showed our location as a place that didn't exist on any map. Even the sun seemed wrong, casting shadows that fell in directions that defied physics. We were lost in a forest we'd been working in for 3 weeks. The hike out took 11 hours through terrain that seemed to shift and rearrange itself when we weren't looking directly at it. Trails that had been straight became circular. Stream beds we'd crossed a dozen times led to waterfalls that hadn't existed the day before. The forest was teaching us that we'd never been in control, never been safe, never been anything more than tolerated guests who had overstayed our welcome. When we finally reached our trucks at the access road, we found Carlos, Tommy, and Steve sitting in their vehicles, engines running, eyes wide with a terror that had aged them years in a single day. They'd been waiting for us, afraid to leave but unable to explain why. "Drive," Jake said. "Don't stop, don't look back, just drive." We caravanned out of there like the forest was on fire behind us. It wasn't until we reached the main highway and had cell service again that anyone spoke. Jake called Pacific Timber from the first gas station we found. The conversation was brief, professional, and final. Our entire crew was terminated for equipment, abandonment, and failure to complete contracted work. Pacific Timber sent a replacement crew to retrieve our machinery. Those men lasted exactly 18 hours before fleeing the site, leaving behind a report that the company immediately classified and buried. According to a Forest Service contact I cultivated months later, the replacement crew found our equipment arranged in patterns that defied physics, chainsaws suspended in midair between trees, our skidder balanced impossibly on its side, fuel containers stacked in structures that should have collapsed under their own weight. The new crew's supervisor described finding evidence of non-human intelligence, demonstrating advanced understanding of mechanical engineering and three-dimensional spatial relationships. His report included photographs that Pacific Timber confiscated and destroyed. The Henderson Creek site was closed permanently within 72 hours, officially due to geological instability and environmental concerns. But I've spent months researching what really happened out there, and the truth is so much worse than corporate cover-ups and bureaucratic silence. The Tillamook Forest has been home to reports of unknown bipedal creatures for over a century. Native tribes in the area have stories going back generations about the tall ones who guard the deep forest and punish those who take too much from the land. Early logging crews in the 1922nd reported similar encounters. Equipment moved in impossible ways, voices mimicking human speech, workers who vanished without a trace. What I've learned is that we weren't the first crew to stumble into their territory, and we won't be the last. But we might have been the first to survive with our sanity mostly intact, and that was only because they let us leave. The nightmares started 3 days after we got home. Not regular dreams, but shared experiences that all 6 surviving crew members reported having simultaneously. We dream about the forest every night, the same forest, the same locations, the same watching eyes in the darkness. In the dreams, we're still there. Still cutting trees. Still being studied by things that understand us better than we understand ourselves. Carlos moved to Nevada and got a job in construction. He calls me sometimes, drunk and crying, saying he can still hear the voices outside his apartment. Tommy started seeing a therapist who specializes in PTSD. But how do you explain trauma caused by creatures that aren't supposed to exist? Steve developed agoraphobia and hasn't left his house in 2 months. Big Mike drinks now, heavily, and won't talk about what happened, except to say that some forests are meant to stay wild. Jake disappeared 6 weeks ago. His wife called me, desperate for answers. She said he'd been obsessing over topographical maps of the Tillamook forest, marking locations and muttering about finishing what we started. His truck was found at the Henderson Creek access road, keys still in the ignition, personal belongings scattered in precise geometric patterns around the vehicle. They never found his body. Maggie is the only one who seems to have made peace with what happened. She left Oregon entirely, moved to her sister's place in Montana, and started working regular restaurant jobs instead of logging camps. Before she left, she told me something that I can't stop thinking about. They weren't trying to hurt us, she said. They were trying to communicate. We just weren't smart enough to understand the message until it was almost too late. I've changed careers. I work construction now, building houses in suburban neighborhoods where the biggest trees are landscaping ornaments and the loudest sounds are lawnmowers. I drive 30 minutes out of my way to avoid wooded areas, and I haven't been camping since that day we fled the Henderson Creek site, but I still feel them watching me. In peripheral vision, in shadows that move wrong, in the space between sleep and waking, when reality gets thin, they learned everything about us during those weeks in the forest. Our voices, our fears, our individual scents and sounds, and the rhythms of our breathing. The question that keeps me awake at night is simple. What are they planning to do with that knowledge? Sometimes, when I'm lying in bed listening to normal city sounds, I hear something else underneath the traffic and sirens and late-night conversations. A low, resonant call that seems to come from massive lungs and vocal cords much larger than anything that should exist in the modern world. And sometimes, just before I fall asleep, I hear my own voice calling back. I think they're still teaching me to communicate. I think the lesson isn't over. I think they're waiting for me to understand the message and come home. My name is Carlos Morales, and what I'm about to tell you happened off the Oregon coast near Newport. I need you to understand something first. I was born and raised in these waters. My grandfather started fishing here. In 1962, my uncle Miguel taught me everything about reading the Pacific, and for 11 years, I thought I knew what lived beneath these waves. I was wrong. The Esperanza was our family's 45-foot crab boat, built in 1998 specifically for the deep canyon runs 40 miles offshore. She could handle 12-foot swells and had never let us down. We'd work the Dungeness crab beds in the underwater canyons, where the continental shelf drops from 200 feet to over 1,000 feet in less than a mile. Out there, the water is so deep and dark that your sonar readings look like you're flying over an alien landscape. Miguel had been making these runs for 32 years. He knew every current, every weather pattern, every GPS coordinate where the big crabs gathered. We survived 3 major storms that sank other boats, pulled crews out of the water twice, and never lost a single crab pot to equipment failure. The man was a legend among Newport fishermen. The ocean has moods, he'd tell me. You learn to read them, respect them, and she'll provide for your family forever. That was before October 15th, 2023. We were working our usual grid about 43 miles northwest of Newport, pulling pots we'd set 2 days earlier. The weather was perfect, clear skies, light swells, water temperature holding steady at 52 degrees. Miguel was running the hydraulic winch while I handled the sorting and rebaiting. We'd pulled up 17 pots that morning, all producing good catches, when pot number 18 came up wrong. The steel mesh cage had been compressed into a perfect sphere about the size of a basketball. Not bent, not torn, compressed with such uniform pressure that the metal had actually fused together in places. The 12, Dungeness. Crabs inside had been crushed into a paste so fine it looked like pink soup. Equipment malfunction, I said, examining the destroyed pot. Maybe the winch cable got wrapped wrong. But Miguel was already checking the winch system, running diagnostics on the hydraulics. Everything was functioning normally. The pot had been crushed on the ocean floor, not during retrieval. 32 years, Carlos, he said, his voice unusually quiet. I've seen pots damaged by storms, cut loose by other boats, even destroyed by submarine cables. But this, he held up a piece of the compressed metal. This took thousands of pounds of pressure, applied from all sides simultaneously. We marked the location and moved to our next string of pots. 3 more came up identically destroyed, perfect spheres of compressed metal and crab paste. By the end of that week, we'd lost 38 pots to the same type of damage. Our insurance adjuster, a guy named Davidson who'd been investigating the marine equipment claims for 15 years, came out to examine the wreckage. I've never seen anything like this, he admitted, photographing the compressed metal. It's like they were put in some kind of industrial compactor, but that's impossible at 400 feet underwater. The Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife suggested we might be dropping our pots on unstable sediment that was causing underwater landslides. The Coast Guard theorized that naval submarines were occasionally transiting through our fishing areas, creating pressure waves that could damage equipment. None of their explanations made sense. Landslides don't create uniform compression. Submarine pressure waves don't selectively target crab pots while leaving the ocean floor undisturbed. That's when our fish finder started picking up impossible readings. On October 28th, we were setting fresh lines when the sonar showed something massive moving beneath our boat. The contact was approximately 70 feet, long and 15 feet wide, traveling at a depth of 180 feet. It appeared as a solid object with segmented features, like an enormous spine or vertebrae moving through the water. Could be a blue whale, I suggested, watching the shape on our screen. Miguel adjusted the sonar settings, trying to get better resolution. Blue whales don't move like that. Watch the pattern. The creature was moving in straight lines with sharp, deliberate turns. No mammal swims that way. Marine animals follow curved paths. They surface for air. They respond to currents and thermal layers. This thing moved with mechanical precision, like it was following a grid pattern. We tried to track it, following its movements across our sonar display. Every time we positioned our boat directly above the contact, it would accelerate downward, disappearing into water too deep for our equipment to penetrate. Over the next week, 5 other boats reported similar sonar contacts. Captain Rodriguez on the Santa Maria described tracking a whale-sized object that moved in geometric patterns. The crew of the Deep Blue reported multiple contacts swimming in perfect formation, maintaining exact spacing like military vessels. The Coast Guard sent out a patrol boat to investigate, but they found nothing. Their official report stated that fishing crews were likely misinterpreting sonar readings of large fish schools or geological formations. But geological formations don't change position overnight. On November 7th, our encounter escalated beyond equipment readings. We were working a productive spot 39 miles offshore when something grabbed our nets from below. I was operating the winch, bringing up what should have been a routine haul, when the cables suddenly went rigid. The winch motor began screaming as it fought against an immense force pulling from the depths. Snagged on something, Miguel said, cutting the engine power. But we weren't snagged. Something was actively pulling our nets deeper, dragging our 30-ton boat backward through the water. The steel cables were stretched so tight I could hear them singing in the wind. Miguel gunned our 400-horsepower diesel engine forward, trying to break free. The Esperanza strained against whatever had seized our equipment, black smoke pouring from our exhaust as the engine fought at maximum power. For 11 minutes, we were locked in an impossible tug-of-war with something beneath the Pacific. Then, without warning, the tension released. Our boat shot forward so violently that Miguel had to grab the wheel to keep us from capsizing. When we finally retrieved our nets, they had been systematically destroyed. Each section had been cut into strips exactly 4 inches wide, the cuts so precise they looked machine-made. No natural force, no ship propeller, No underwater debris could have created such uniform destruction. "Something down there has blades," Miguel said, examining the shredded brush and bread. "Netting, multiple blades, working in coordination." That evening, we anchored in shallow water to repair what equipment we could salvage. As the sun set, the ocean around our boat began to glow. Bioluminescent patterns appeared in the water, not the random sparkles of disturbed plankton, but organized geometric shapes. Circles, triangles, and complex spiral formations that pulsed with deliberate rhythm. The patterns were clearly intentional, like some form of underwater communication system. "Miguel, you need to see this," I called. He came to the rail and stood silently watching the light show. The patterns were growing larger, more complex, moving in coordinated formations toward our boat. Through the glowing water, we could see a massive dark silhouette rising from the depths. The creature was unlike anything in marine biology textbooks. Its central body was roughly cylindrical, approximately 60 feet long, with multiple thick appendages extending in all directions. Each tentacle was as thick as a telephone pole and covered with what appeared to be metallic suction cups that reflected the bioluminescent patterns. As it approached our boat, one tentacle broke the surface near our stern. The appendage was dark gray, almost black, with a skin texture that looked more mechanical than biological. The suction cups weren't just circular discs, they had serrated metallic edges that looked like industrial cutting tools. More tentacles surfaced around our boat until we were completely surrounded. The creature was studying us, moving its appendages in slow, deliberate patterns while the bioluminescent signals continued pulsing beneath the water. Miguel started our engine, but before we could move, one massive tentacle wrapped around our anchor line. The creature began pulling us down, tilting our boat at an increasingly dangerous angle. Water started washing over our stern as we were dragged deeper into the Pacific. "Mayday, Mayday," I radioed. "This is the fishing vessel Esperanza. GPS coordinates 44.8521 north, 124.9847 west. We are under attack by an unknown marine creature. Requesting immediate assistance." The Coast Guard dispatcher asked me to repeat the transmission, clearly not believing what she'd heard. Miguel was fighting back, running our engine at maximum power while the creature continued pulling us under. Our diesel engine roared, the propeller churning white water, but we couldn't break free from the thing's grip. Just as I thought we were going to be pulled completely underwater, the creature released us. We shot forward across the surface like a cork from a bottle, Miguel fighting to regain control as we raced away from the encounter site. When we finally stopped and assessed the damage, we found 4 deep gouges in our fiberglass hull where the tentacles had gripped us. Each mark was precisely shaped, about 8 inches deep and perfectly spaced. But what terrified me most, he was realizing that the gouges were shallow. The creature had been restraining itself. If it had wanted to crush our boat, we would have been completely helpless. We radioed other fishing vessels about our encounter, but most crews dismissed our story as exhaustion-induced hallucinations or an insurance scam. However, 3 captains took us seriously enough to share their own experiences. Captain Martinez on the Isabella showed us photographs of his destroyed crab pots, twisted into perfect spiral shapes that defied physics. The metal had been heated and reshaped while underwater, something impossible without industrial equipment. Old Pete from the Mary Catherine described seeing massive tentacles moving just below the surface near his boat, but when he tried to film them with his phone, his electronic equipment malfunctioned. His GPS, fish finder, and radio had all shut down simultaneously. Most disturbing was Captain Sarah Chen on the Pacific Dream. Her boat had been grabbed by something underwater 3 weeks earlier, but she'd never reported it. When she described her experience, it matched our encounter exactly. The bioluminescent patterns, the coordinated tentacle movements, the creature's apparent intelligence. "It was studying my boat," she said, "learning about us." The harbor master, Bill Hendricks, quietly advised fishing vessels to avoid the deep canyon areas until further notice. He couldn't make it an official restriction without concrete evidence, but word spread through Newport's fishing community. "Stay in water less than 200 feet deep. Don't work alone. Keep your radios monitored." But Dungeness crab fishing depends on the deep canyon waters. The shallow areas don't produce enough crabs to make a living. Most crews continued working the dangerous depths because they had no choice. Miguel and I attempted 2 more deep-water runs, but both times our sonar detected the massive serpentine shape tracking us from below. During our final trip, the bioluminescent patterns began forming around our boat before we'd even stopped to set our pots. "It knows our boat," Miguel said, his hands shaking as he turned us toward shore. "It recognizes our engine signature, our sonar frequency. It's been watching us." That night, Miguel sat in his kitchen drinking coffee until dawn, staring out his window at the harbor. When I came by the next morning, he looked like he'd aged 10 years overnight. "I've been having dreams, Carlos," he said. "Dreams where I'm underwater, and that thing is showing me something. Images of the ocean floor covered with bones. Human bones. Boat wreckage from decades past. It's been down there a long time, and we're not the first fishermen it's encountered." Miguel told me he'd been researching historical shipping records, looking for patterns of missing vessels off the Oregon coast. What he found disturbed him even more. Since 1952, 17 fishing boats have disappeared in those exact coordinates, he said, showing me printouts from maritime archives. No distress calls, no wreckage ever found. The Coast Guard classified them as weather-related losses, but look at the dates. The disappearances occurred in perfect 7-year cycles. Itenzo by Wushar, Itenzo by Wushajo, Itenzo by Loshalo, Itenzo by Tishasen, Itenzo by Bashir, Itenzo by Bashatsi, Itenzo by Zoshasi, Liantenling-yi, Liantenling-ba, Liantenling-yi Shawu. According to Miguel's calculations, the next cycle would be 2022. We'd encountered the creature in October 2023 to 1 year late. "Maybe it was sleeping," Miguel said. "Maybe something woke it up." 2 weeks after our encounter, Miguel sold the Esperanza to a boat dealer in Portland. He took a construction job in Salem, 70 miles inland, and refused to discuss what had happened that night. But before he left Newport, he pulled me aside. "That thing isn't just a predator, Carlos. It's intelligent, it's territorial, and it's been protecting something down in those canyons for a very long time. We disrupted something we weren't supposed to see." He handed me a manila envelope containing copies of all his research, DPA, the missing boat records, sonar readings, photographs of the destroyed equipment. "If something happens to me," he said, "make sure someone knows the truth about what's out there." Miguel left Newport on November 30th. On December 3rd, his truck was found wrapped around a tree on Highway 22, 20 miles outside Salem. The Oregon State Police ruled it a single-vehicle accident caused by driver fatigue, but I knew better. Miguel had been having the dreams every night since our encounter. Dreams where the creature showed him visions of the deep ocean, images that left him screaming and sweating. His neighbors complained about the noise. His doctor prescribed sleeping pills that didn't work. The thing had marked him somehow, connected with his mind during those minutes when we were trapped in its grip. And when Miguel moved inland, trying to escape, the psychological connection had driven him insane. I attended Miguel's funeral on December 8th. As his casket was lowered into the ground, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The cemetery was exactly 73 miles from the Pacific Ocean, the same distance as the creature's hunting territory based on our sonar readings. Even in death, Miguel couldn't escape its influence. I still live in Newport, but I don't fish the deep waters anymore. I work day trips on other boats, staying in water less than 100 feet deep, always within sight of shore. At night, I walk down to the harbor and look out at the ocean, watching for those blue-green bioluminescent patterns. They're appearing more frequently now, moving closer to shore. The tourist board has started advertising Newport's mysterious light shows to bring in visitors, completely unaware of what they're promoting. Other fishermen tell me they've seen the lights too. Jake Morrison on the Seahawk reported his electronics malfunctioning whenever the patterns appear. Captain Torres described seeing massive shapes moving beneath the harbor jetties during low tide. Most disturbing are the new disappearances. Since Miguel's death, 3 more fishermen have died in accidents after working the deep canyons. All single-vehicle crashes, all occurring exactly 73 miles from the ocean. The creature isn't just hunting in the water anymore. It's learning to eliminate threats on land. I've been having the dreams too now. Visions of the deep ocean floor, littered with the wreckage of boats dating back over a century. I see the bones of fishermen who got too close to whatever that thing is protecting down in the canyons. And I see myself, standing on the deck of the Esperanza, watching as those massive tentacles rise from the depths for the last time. The dreams are getting stronger, more detailed, more real. I know what happened to Miguel now. The creature marked both of us that night, created some kind of psychic connection that distance can't break. It's calling me back to the deep water, showing me images of what lies beneath the Pacific floor. I've been fighting the compulsion for 2 months, but it's getting harder to resist. Last night, I found myself standing in my driveway at 3 a.m., car keys in my hand, ready to drive back to the harbor. The thing wants me to return. It wants to finish what it started. I'm leaving this account with my attorney, along with copies of Miguel's research and photographs of our destroyed equipment. If you're reading this, it means I've gone back to the deep water. It means the creature's psychological influence finally overcame my resistance. To anyone thinking about fishing, the deep canyons off Newport, don't. Whatever lives down there has been protecting those waters for longer than humans have been sailing them. The missing boats, the destroyed equipment, the fishermen who went insane, it's all connected to something ancient and intelligent that doesn't want us in its territory. The ocean isn't safe anymore. It never was. And if you start having dreams about the deep water, about tentacles and bioluminescent patterns and bones scattered across the ocean floor, get as far from the coast as you can. Drive inland and don't stop until you're at least 100 miles from the Pacific. Because once it marks you, distance doesn't matter, time doesn't matter. It will call you home to the deep water. And eventually, you'll answer.